So, you guys have an outstanding conference lined up. I wish you a very successful conference and that you hopefully get a chance to come and see our campus. It really is amazing how our campus is transforming. So unfortunately, I can't continue to join you all today. I have to get back to, because I have projects that we are running. But again, have a wonderful conference. So take care.
Awesome. Sounds like you are also on the way to a bright future like we are with GDN. That's how you connect the dots, right? Just introducing our first session of the day, which they gave a title which is very easy to pronounce if you're a non-native English speaker. So it's about advancing the philosophical interoperability in the global ecosystem. Oh, not too bad. So, and it's a call to action, which is what we're all about. So I hope that's the big takeaway from that. So let me just invite the speakers to the podium. First, he's the SVP and Chief Data Ecosystem Officer from Strada, Jonathan Furr. Take your seat. Then the Executive Director of AACRAO and our current Vice President and your new President starting at the end of this meeting, Melanie Gottlieb. One of our usual suspects, but always a great addition to any panel that you're organizing, the Director of Global Ecosystems and Innovations at Parchment by Instructure, Simone Ravaioli. And then we have the VP from the US Chamber of Commerce, Jason Tyszko. I'm totally butchering that. I'm sorry.
No, you did. Yeah.
Tyszko? Good. Okay. Welcome. I'll give the floor to you guys for this session. And thank you so much for being here, and take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Jelger. Thank you to my colleagues for being here today. I'm going to set the stage just for a minute. When we're talking about GDN outside of the network, we often shortcut it. We always say that the vision is that an individual should be able to share their secure, authentic, verifiable digital record with whomever they want, whenever they want, from wherever they are. And that's the guiding star for GDN, to create that ecosystem, both technical and policy framework ecosystem, to make that happen. So as one of the founding organizations, AACRAO helped to craft the Groningen Declaration. The principles that are addressed in that document from nearly a dozen years ago, they still resonate. They've evolved a bit, but they're still at the core what we're seeking to do. We're looking for convergence of systems. We're looking for addressing privacy rights, the ownership of data, identification, access, and sharing of data, the compatibility of systems and data, the autonomy and diversity of the systems that are holding that data, all of this, and the diversity of modes of delivery, all of this to benefit both the learner and the skilled worker. So to achieve that goal, from wherever you're sitting, whether you're in a national system or whether we're in the US, it requires a multi-sector cooperation and collaboration. We need national collaboration, we need bilateral collaboration to achieve that seamless goal. What I love about the GDN is the ability to have the thought leaders in that conversation, the visionaries in that conversation here in one space, because it is when we connect and think about what we are doing and trying to achieve that we can start to build on each other's work and we can make this happen. I really believe that's where all of this convergence that was visioned by the GDN initially can take place. So in the US, this landscape is really complicated. It's highly decentralized. There are multiple players trying to achieve multiple different things. They're similar, but they're doing it different ways. it was identified in our workshop this morning that one of the challenges and things we need to work on is about policy clarity. And I love that sort of phrasing of that, policy clarity. And when we talk about policy, I'm thinking small p policy, not big P policy. That may come as well, but small p. And so my organization, AACRAO, is hoping to adapt and adopt a set of principles that in the US that higher ed can coalesce around, to give the multiple players across the multiple sectors a guiding star to align ourselves with so that we can move things and make it happen. So we asked our key stakeholder group of higher ed organizations, what are the key ethical considerations surrounding the evolution of this global learn work ecosystem? And how would they translate that into a set of principles? So they shared with us all of their sets of principles that are related. And so we did an analysis of more than 20 statements of principles in higher ed related to this LER, global learner data ecosystem. And we've identified a very draftiest of drafts, set that our organizations can tentatively agree on. So we've got all of our stakeholder associations who've said, yes, these are items that we can all coalesce around. We'll have to define them, we'll have to do more work. And so I'm gonna ask that slide to be shown. Oh, it is up there, look at that, it's already there. So it's that the system should be collaborative. It should be designed for all users. It should be interoperable, skills-based, that it needs to take into consideration privacy and security. Individual agency is key, that we have to tackle issues around identity, authorization, and authentication, and that data needs to be survivable. So that's an alignment that we think in higher ed in the US we can get around. My colleagues on this stage are all deeply engaged in their own networks, in their own work that are all around this. And so I'd like to hear some thoughts from each of them around, and perhaps some advice around how we might work to align these principles that inform and drive the ecosystem, and this evolving network of networks that is gonna create this ecosystem. So I'm gonna start with John. John, can you talk a little bit about your work at Strada, your thoughts about principles as a mechanism for strengthening the network, and then about how this approach will work in the US?
Thank you, Melanie. I'm John Furr, Senior Vice President and Chief Data Ecosystem Officer at Strada Education Foundation. I mostly took the job just to have the really cool job title. But for those of you who might not be familiar with Strada, we are a large US-based philanthropy focused on post-secondary education to employment. And although our work focuses within the United States, we certainly recognize that that learning is global, and that learners are increasingly globally mobile. And as we think about a project that we're doing right now, there might be welders in Montana that are being trained for work on Canadian projects. There may be behavioral health specialists in Colorado that are using learning from Mexico that they want to be able to employ to help them advance. There might be cybersecurity specialists in Pittsburgh with teammates in South Africa that are all kind of training toward the same skills. So I think oftentimes from a philanthropic standpoint, we get caught up in our geographic focus, realizing that doesn't align to the global world in which we all live. And that's why I'm very excited to be part of the group and the conversations here at this particular network. In terms of Strada, we think about our work around 5 strategic pillars, one of which is clear outcomes, and that's the work that I'm responsible for leading. And our overall goal is thinking about how everyone can have access to clear and trusted data to guide education to employment decisions. And that vision certainly includes having data on program outcomes, but it also includes the ability for learners to be able to utilize their own data, the information that they have on what they have learned on their employment experiences to be able to unlock different opportunities. And within the United States, and Melanie had talked about this some, we have a highly fragmented post-secondary education system. So there are a multitude of both 2- and 4-year institutions, but one of the distinguishing factors from a lot of places in the world is that short-term credentials are sometimes they are issued through our post-secondary institutions, but oftentimes they're not. They're through nonprofit entities, sometimes private for-profit entities, industry certification bodies. There's a whole array which are contributing to a learner's journey. So it becomes much more complex even than just working through your post-secondary system. You have to think about ways that you can be able to bring together information across all of these different silo players, and many of which do not have any sort of history of actually sharing data in ways that can be utilized for that learner journey. So from our standpoint, we really think that principles and standards are the only core way that you can start to make sure that learning is not lost across that lifelong journey that learners are taking, right? Because it's not all going to happen within one institution or one setting. So you have to think about how do you begin to link that data on that learner across those multiple different experiences. And one project that I'll talk about that we've been involved recently with a number of other projects is the Skills Forward initiative. And this is a $10 million US dollar project that pooled funding across different funders and funded 7 projects throughout the US focused on this question about how do you think about end-to-end connections and interoperability. And there was a lot of work up front that I did with many people in the room. I see Deb there from Credential Engine and other partners that was trying to say, how do we start to articulate before this money goes out the door, and this was all private dollars, all foundation dollars, but before it goes out the door, how do we actually articulate the expectations for those projects about how they need to ensure, again, that we have the end-to-end interoperability, that learning that you begin to address the principles that Melanie has talked about, and that those are articulated in such a way that the project teams can actually utilize them. And I like to joke, like the key challenge for that, I felt, was like taking 60 different documents, each that were 60 pages long, and trying to condense that in about 6 pages. To say, actually, these are the set of principles and standards and expectations that someone who's in a state government office or a post-secondary system, or someone who's managing this work can actually begin to utilize that to inform their work, and then can drill down into those types of deeper standards. And I think what we've been learning along the way with that effort is that it can't, especially when there's the emerging process of these projects to roll out, it can't be all or nothing to say, like, you know, yes, you got it or you didn't and you're kicked out. No, it's more, this is a developmental process. How do we have a formative process to work with the project teams to say, you're actually helping to address this requirement well, but there's work that you need to be doing on this area, and how do we think about efforts to kind of work with both the vendors and the partner teams for them to understand what those next phases of work might be. And also, one aspect for this within the US is that so much of this work happens at the state level. We will never, like South Africa, as they were talking about a national learner data repository, that will never happen within the US. So we have entities like the National Student Clearinghouse and others that are national nonprofits in scope, but our federal government doesn't drive learning standards or requirements and doesn't bring in that learner level data. So oftentimes our strategies within the US are thinking about building out those state level strategies, getting alignment to standards and requirements, reaching a tipping point with enough states and enough players that you start to bring along the vendors and other partners within this work. And that's been the nature of our effort. So happy to build on that more, but thank you, Melanie.
Thanks so much. So I'm going to ask Simone next. You know, your work in this space goes back to the origins of GDN and perhaps even a little earlier. And this workshop that you've just done with T3 that you facilitated, I think teased out a lot of really interesting pieces. What are your thoughts about how we leverage principles moving into what we're calling philosophically interoperable global data ecosystem?
Thank you, Melanie. I just, love the association of oxymoron of philosophical interoperability. I mean, it was time we had that conversation. So in principle, we should agree on principles, right? Mm-hmm. But over the years, what that has created, I think, is an abundance of declarations. Yeah. I live in Italy, and the first declaration that became an orientation for my professional work was the Bologna Declaration. That was clearly supporting mobility, so that's how the journey started. And over the years, that was 1999, I have had the opportunity to participate in drafting some declarations, including GDN and others. And you can't get away from it. That is the starting point. I mean, it's a non-starter to not align on principles. So that's key. But more and more, I have this urgency, like to see how those principles are put into practice. Principles typically express attention to a topic, but we need to show more intentionality about the principles. And so I guess, I mean, intention would be, think of it as attention plus action. And so, what are the things that we are doing to really show integrity as another value on the principles? Like, for example, if you say that you love your mom, you go and see her once in a while. Like, if you say that you believe in some principles, then you have to act on them. And I think more and more we need to be hungry for more of the evidence that supports the principles. Because when we look at the principles, and even in the exercise that we did this morning, so we had this workshop bringing together two networks, T3 Innovation Network and GDN Network, there is an amazing alignment on the principle side. Yeah. So both the networks call for multi-stakeholders collaboration. We want to empower individuals, ensure data quality, and promote data interoperability. But how are we going to do that? And what are the metrics? I mean, how are we going to measure us on living up to those principles? And so I have been thinking about that, and I don't know if you're familiar with the marketing mix. Have you heard of the marketing mix? Anyone? So it has to do with 4 Ps, right? There are product, price, promotion, and place. And so I thought I came up with the network mix. All right? So it's still 4 Ps, but those are principles, policies, projects, and people.
Ooh.
Nice.
And
I like it.
But it's all good and well. I think the first 3, well, the first 2 principles and policies are still abstract. You're still talking about frameworks and policies and guidelines. But when you get into projects and people, that is where the rubber hits the road. You think of project as products, meaning practice, right? Which is really where people start to engage. I feel like we live in an ecosystem that is aligned already on principles and policies. I think we have the technologies that would support all those principles. But when we get to the practice, I think there's a lot of work to do. Mm-hmm. And practice is where people come in. Practice is where you have to deal with change management. And so, it was evident, or at least from, my personal observation point, that, we need way to be able to influence more of that practice, because we would all agree on issues, but then how come we don't make the progress that we should have made? It was refreshing to hear T3 engage with this network, because if you spoke to people that have been in GDN for a while, you might hear them complain offside that we haven't really achieved or executed on those principles yet. And it's been more than 10 years. So it may be optics, but I think, part of the philosophical interoperability has to manifest in practice. And I think the good news is that we have a lot of ideas and projects stacking up. And if we bring them together, we'll find, and this was the discovery in this morning's session, that there is alignment. Yeah. For example, one project that I mentioned from this morning is in the US, the Chamber of Commerce Foundation is driving this idea of a skill savings account, right? Which is about companies putting money into people's wallets so that they can be turned into skills. And I'm sure Jason can tell us a bit more about that. In Europe, we have a similar initiative called the Individual Learning Account. Same thing, but the money comes from government. So those are projects that are built on the same principles, where the two networks coming together could really find benefits or inform each other. And maybe we get to some more practice or some more impact. So I guess, it's this network mix that popped up in my mind, and I thought it would stack from principles to people, and turns out this is a network made of great people. So hopefully we'll be able to solve for that.
I love that. That was very well said. I want to turn it over and ask Jason, reflecting on what's been said and also thinking about your experiences, can you talk a little bit about some of the barriers that you might see or the challenges in achieving this philosophical interoperability between the higher ed silo and the workforce silo, and how can we address these issues in a collaborative way and solve them?
Yeah, thank you, Melanie. And just for those of you who might not be familiar with our organization, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is the world's largest business federation. We represent over 1,500 state and local chambers, a network of American chambers of commerce, and small to mid-sized companies make up the majority of our membership. I'm here representing the foundation side of our house, which is our nonprofit affiliate. So it is not membership-driven, it's philanthropically driven. It has a social impact mission, and the work I oversee with my colleague, Taylor Hansen, who's here today, is really looking at elevating the employer leadership role around a wide variety of education and workforce issues. And as part of that portfolio, we support the T3 Innovation Network, we coordinate that, and it's all about trying to bring the business community, higher ed community, government, the military, and the technology vendors that serve them to promote data interoperability for the talent marketplace. So that's what kind of brought us here today. The workshop that we hosted earlier today was really trying to bring what we've learned in that data interoperability discussion to GDN, but also to help elevate the projects, one of the 4 Ps, that we've been engaged in where there might be some opportunities for collaboration across our respective networks. To the question, I would provide 3 responses. There is a technology gap, there's a human gap, and there's a finance gap. On the technology side, which is much of what we focused on this morning, and I suspect will be a theme running throughout the conference, we've made good progress. And as we're getting the data standards right, we're promoting data standards mapping, and we're understanding what needs to be done at the technology level to be able to create data, share data, and use data to address different use cases. One of the big things that we learned when bringing the employer community in is, guess what? You all have education data standards bodies. We have data standards bodies for human resources. They're different. And it's not about one necessarily displacing the other. It's about promoting data interoperability across them because they do different things. They're different systems. They're different vendors. And there's work to be done there if we want to make sure that we're not just passing out image files, but individuals are able to actually have data about their experiences and learning and be able to share that with an employer that's using one of these systems so they could accurately be assessed about, for example, their qualifications for a job opportunity. So that was one thing, is how do we make that? Because in the early days, people thought, hey, an LER is going to replace a resume. No, it won't, not necessarily. A resume can be composed of data from multiple LERs, but it still needs to be in the form of something that is machine actionable that can be shared with the employer. Well, with the support of Walmart and Gates Foundation, we developed the LER resume standard, and we're going to have a free publishing tool available next year that will allow someone to take 1 or more LERs to compose a resume that's machine actionable with an employer HRIS. We're getting there. So we're starting to solve for interoperability. So real progress on the board. Now we got to look at the human problem. That's infinitely more complicated. So on the human problem side, you need to address all the cultural issues that are happening within the private sector. And I say private sector, but I mean employers writ large because, public sector and government, they're also employers, big employers in many cases. So how are we going to solve for adoption by changing culture? And that's more than just getting the technology right. That's about getting people to buy in to using records in new ways and participating in those records as well. So, for example, if I'm going to be hiring somebody and they want to present new credentials that are infused with all of this data, let's assume I have the technology that can parse it. Why would I necessarily care if that has never been relevant in my life? If I've never had those experiences, never had those records, no one's giving me any record anytime soon, and yet I'm supposed to understand and unlock this value proposition, I might get it, I might not. But now think about all the incumbent workers that are out there today who've not participated in any of these records, who don't really know a lot about them, but even if they knew about them, don't have any experience using them. Just think of the change management problem, like Simone highlighted. Big change management issue. And I think one of the ways we can close that gap is by bringing this modernization effort to the current workforce. An example of that is one of the projects T3 supports called Experience U. And the idea there was, can we use AI to work with someone like me to bring my past education and employment experiences forward and to render it as skills-based, standards-based, as a skills-based, standards-based record. So if I could at least do that and self-assert it, it beats the resume, because now it's at least machine actionable data, and technologies help me better describe my experiences. Now, another thing we're developing is a linked claim standard that would allow me to then share that record with others, including folks in the room, who could validate that they've seen me demonstrate those learning outcomes or those skills, and I now have that information. So here I am, not coming out of an education program, but I'm able to start producing data about my experience. I can get that data validated by my peers, my supervisor, and others, and I can compose a resume based upon that data. All of a sudden now, this is working for me, and if I see someone coming in with this, I want to work with them. So it becomes relevant to my life, so now I'm willing to accept others who are coming with these new records. The third area is finance, how you pay for it. And Simone mentioned skill savings accounts as one approach, but you got to think about the adoption challenge really being a finance challenge, because it's more than just technology and humans and culture, it's also markets, and money moves markets. So what are the incentive structures in place to encourage adoption and use of these records? Not only the consumption of them, but the issuing of them. And we really need to think through both the public financing options, but also the private financing options for how to make it relevant. With the example of skill savings accounts, what we're trying to do is how do we bring new money into the system? And if employers are trying to invest in their workers in new and innovative ways so they can go and purchase skills as opposed to traditional degrees, not in place of, but giving them more options. Well, if we made a skills-based LER the new transcript of choice, that then creates a new market with new revenue that education and workforce providers can go after to get a piece of that. But now they need to render the learning in a new way. They need to issue a new type of record, but the financial incentive is now there for them to do it. It's not doing it because they think it's the right thing to do or the smart thing to do. They're also doing it because it's bringing new revenue into their organization. So we're trying to think creatively about how to close that finance gap, because if we don't get that right, my concern is this is going to be a very slow grind and very boutique. But if we get the money right, we get people bought in culturally, and the technology's there when we're ready, I think this can go far.
That's excellent. And it perfectly aligns with your 4 Ps for this global interoperability system. We are near the end of our time. I just want to wrap it up perhaps by saying, I think that with the GDN, to talk about the principles question, the GDN set a bar for a global set of principles. We're never going to have a single set of principles in 240 countries and 52 states in the US. It's going to be challenging, but I think that the GDN is the perfect space to begin to start to collaborate across those and to get the change management strategies around how we move each of our individual systems in the right direction. And so for us in the US, we're really thinking about it from a sector base and then connecting with other sectors in order to help drive that forward. So I would encourage our colleagues who are here in the room to connect with all of my colleagues on the stage while they're here this week, because they each represent a unique perspective on this driving principles and policy and practice, and I've messed up your Ps. But ultimately, I think the biggest problem is the people. Mm-hmm. The people piece is the big one. That's change management. How do we all align everyone in the ecosystem around us in our national context to drive toward this one goal? Do you have anything else you'd like to say? We have about a minute.
Yeah, I'll maybe add, I'll add 2 more Ps to Simone's 4 Ps. But I think with the people, there's real power in peer-to-peer learning for moving this type of work at scale. So I think that we all view this as an opportunity for, within the US, to learn from international peers, and hopefully likewise, and then sharing those practices is the way I think you really accelerate efforts and work. That's a big part of our strategy at Strada within the US and moving states is state peer-to-peer learning. And I think that model is something that the GDN can really utilize to leverage the movement across the countries here.
Excellent. All right.
If I could add a final thought, really just getting to know the GDN network, really excited to be here, to collaborate, to sponsor. We really want to get to know you all at the U.S. Chamber Foundation and would welcome any conversations. Just so you know, one thing that keeps me up at night is in the United States context, we have a workforce of approximately 180 million. And as we move into a more and more dynamic economy where jobs are going to be changing more often, what keeps me up at night is how do we upskill and reskill that workforce routinely and at scale? That is a monumental problem. And knowing that problem is on the horizon, if not already here, I think we need to really make quick progress on this this philosophical interoperability because this is the future. And we're going to need to be providing a lot more, but recognizing a lot more learning and doing that in a trusted way. And that's not a problem that just like the US needs to solve. That is a global problem. We're all going to be struggling with it. And we might as well be talking together and sharing best practices, challenges, opportunities, and figuring it out as a network. Because going it alone is just going to be a disservice to all of us. It's just going to take longer. It's going to be more expensive. And the challenge and opportunity is too great to go it alone. So we just invite more partnership, more conversations, more engagement like this, and would love to work with all of you.
Yeah, maybe just a reflection on the network of networks and how the convergence of themes could help. So 3 things: principally aligned, neurodivergent. It's important. The networks need to be diverse, neurodivergent, and flowing, where tension is flow. So there needs to be that right level of tension that creates energy. So not just completely aligned, but there's diversity and tension I think are 2 key ingredients for the network of networks.
Thank you all.
Awesome.
I think the hook is here.
Give them a round of applause. Jonathan, Melanie, Simone, Jason, thank you so much. This is a perfect example of a typical GDN plenary session, which is a problem in itself because it's inspiring, but I already have homework and it's just the first session. So, one of the benefits of having a great support team is that they send you a text when you forget to mention one of them in your opening remarks, which of course is terrible that I did that. So please give a round of applause to Ton in the back of the room, who makes sure that all your presentations are loaded in the event, etc. Before we start our next session, I just want to point out that we have a great program, not only with great sessions, but we have the opening reception at the end of the day today. Tomorrow we have the gala dinner. So I'm hoping that all of you will join us there so that you can also have stimulating conversations outside of this very dark room. Our next session is about AI. This is one that I'm really excited about. The lack of fair recognition of refugees not only deprives them of their human rights and hampers their personal development and integration into society, but it also represents a missed economic opportunity for host countries. So this session will explore how AI can augment the recognition of refugees to support integration and identify pathways for opportunities for a specific use case, part of the Experience You Face 2 cohort. So we have some speakers in the room. We also have a speaker online who wasn't able to be here, but I'll introduce the speakers now. First, welcome back to the stage, Simone. We also have Colin Reynolds, who's the Senior Designer of Digital Transformation of the Education Design Lab. Please join us on stage, Colin. Online, if all goes well, we have Borhin Shakroon, who's the Director for Policies and Lifelong Learning Systems at UNESCO. I'm just hoping he's here. And has Chris already joined the chat? Okay. So we also have Chris Richmond-Z, who's the founder of migrants.it. Hi, Borhan. Good to see you. Sorry you weren't able to join us, but if he can't come in person, he's always online in a session every year, so you can count on that. Thank you so much. And the floor is over to you. So enjoy.
Do we have a clicker? Okay. I have a mic, so yeah. I just need a clicker. Yep. Hey, friends. Hey, Borhan. Good to see you, my friend. All right. From outer space. Awesome. All right, so obviously the title of my presentation was picked up. It was a clickbait, AI and recognition of refugees. How could you overload a session more? But hopefully we'll be able to talk about recognition, a little bit of AI, and certainly with the help of my fellow friends here. So what happens when you fly over here is that you lose sleep at night and you come up with crazy ideas, right? Like the 4 Ps. I have a few more here for you. But so let's get this party started. Hello, GDN. So we've been thinking about an acronym for this network. And so I thought I would share this. You are the global digital credential nomads. How's your journey been from Amman, Jordan, to here? How have you dealt with the adversities? Have you grown out of them? The fact that we're all migrants should be front and center for all of us. We move around like crazy to meet, and one of the key themes that we address is mobility. Student mobility, workers mobility, talent mobility. And so I thought I wanted you to reflect that we're all migrants, and then this notion of mobility is key for us in the policies, in the technologies, in the practice, and in the people. One of the theory of change that inspired this notion of REGEN was really born out of the fact that I think migrants and refugees should be reframed from being a challenge to being an opportunity. So not a problem, but an opportunity. And back in the days, one of the earlier thought was really shaped around the fact that in Europe, for example, we very much value student mobility. We have a very famous mobility program called Erasmus. And that Erasmus experience over the years has really been proven to lead to more employable outcomes. So there is a unique skill set, which I would call Erasmusness, that has a set of competences like language, tolerance, versatility, resilience, empathy. I mean, those are skills that are hard to train for, that the market seeks. And then if you really think about it, we have an influx of people that carry it. Why? Because of their own mobility experience. It's a traumatic mobility experience. It's not your typical Erasmus fun study experience abroad. But there should be a reframing. And the idea of recognition and just really opening up recognition to that was key to the thought that really runs this session. Particularly with refugees, the ability to open up and to value them, empower them for the experience that they've been through or what they can bring was really substantially key. And so we've been doing a lot of thinking around this. And some of that thinking we want to bring to the session today. All right, so adversity is a key theme. And in talking about AI for this session, I thought I'd quote pretty famous guy who's been doing really well lately. Jensen Huang, he's the CEO of NVIDIA. They are the hardware of the artificial intelligence. And in a recent conversation or talk to Stanford graduates, he actually told them that they should suffer ample doses of pain and suffering was key for them, because he would argue that they're not resilient enough, and that's really what it takes. And so those are all things that greatness comes from character, and character can only be built through adversity. Now, if Chris was on the line here, hopefully he will join us. He will tell you that the tagline of migrants is opportunity in adversity, and I very much believe that we should really focus on that piece, right? So why did we call this session REGEN? What does that mean? Well, it is an acronym, yes, another one. And I wanted to take you through this elements to set up this session. So the R stands for recognition. That's the key value, the fundamental value, on top of which we build technologies, enabling technologies like digital credentials. Recognition is really conducive to a whole new set of, a new category of technology that we call empowerment tech. And the E, in fact, stands for empowerment. Now, the E might stand for employers, too, in LERs, but here it stands for empowerment. And this act of recognizing migrants and people that have been through journeys, life journeys, that have equipped them with skills is really key. And I think if we want to really switch paradigm when we talk about credentialing and we talk about migrants and technology, it has really to do with go above and beyond the recognition of the formal recognition of formal qualifications. You know, we can make the invisible manifest if we really listen and if we're able to be more careful around valuing people's experiences in person, even letting them self-attest, even letting them tell you a story of what they've been through. And you have to do the hard part of figuring out what does that really mean. And yes, technology might help with that more than ever today. Now, the gen piece, this is where we start to get into AI. Well, you know, I mean, it's generative, of course, and we know that, you know, we are dealing with general artificial intelligence. In a sense, think of it as the opportunity for this approach to go, again, beyond, not just a synergy, but just create what are called positive externalities or positive side effects. I think as you start to empower people, you bring them into society, there are plenty of studies that are articulating the economic value or the economic loss of non-recognition for refugees. And so the positive externality is empowering the people, but also creating economic values and benefits. The other is, well, you know, generative intelligence, artificial intelligence. We'll explore how this might impact, but imagine in all the use cases that we're hearing about artificial intelligence in education, particularly in recognition, think of the ability to have a conversation at scale with a migrant that shares the story of his life, his traumatic mobility experience, and being able to pick out weak signals of latent skills that this person might have, but they may not be aware of. What if that conversation was done in a culturally sensitive way? What if it was done in their own language? Now, those are all things that are now possible, and they were not possible before. And REGEN, in the end, also stands for Refugees Generation. Because refugees, migrants, these issues next to climate change is not going to go away. It's only going to increase, and so we have to figure things out. REGEN was also the acronym that really gave to a blueprint, an idea, frankly, that was supposed to be leading, orienting work around leveraging technologies for recognition of refugees. And there are 5 main components to this idea. And in all these components, there's a little bit of AI sprinkled, as you can see. So discovery, we just talked about it. Like, how about I can elicit latent skills from stories, from narratives? Second piece is validation. What if I could use AI to generate small quizzes, small validation on the latent skills that I picked up from their stories? Third is alignment. What if I could take those validated skills and align them to existing competence frameworks? Fourth is recognition. This is what we're mostly familiar with, and it is about issuing digital credentials, attesting, you know, those specific skills. And the fifth component, and possibly the most important one, is impact. So what if we could create pathways or imagine or suggest pathways to employment or to upskilling based on the 4 components above? So this was an idea that was really inspired by doing work in this ecosystem, but also personally doing community service in this space. But about a few months ago, in conversation with UNESCO, particularly with Boren and a few other colleagues, with whom we've been thinking about global recognition convention. We've been looking at projects like the European Qualification Passport for Refugees or the A26 backpack. Europe has another project called the Skills Passport for Third Country Nationals. So there's a bunch of initiatives. So we wanted to take a closer look and see what is enabled now that was not possible before through the use of technology like AI. And so this is really where REGEN came from. I wanted to provide this context so that, with our friends and panelists here, we can dive a little bit deeper into it. So I hope that's clear. And with that said, I would like to ask Boran, if he hears us, to say hello and jump in. Boran, are you with us?
Yes, hello, Simone, and hello to all colleagues. And it's the second time that I miss being with you, but obviously I'm with my heart, with my spirit with you. And I was listening to the session earlier and really appreciate this dialogue and discussion. Also discovering what is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is doing regarding the skill saving. And as you mentioned, Simone, this more, I would call it a human-centered approach is really music in my ears. Now, coming to the point that we are discussing in this session, first of all, let me recall, Simone and colleagues, that all the new convention that we have adopted on recognition of qualifications, particularly for higher education qualification, they do include the recognition of refugees and displaced persons as a right and as an aspect of any dimension of the recognition. So basically, the Global Convention on Recognition of Higher Education Qualifications does refer to the right of refugees for recognition. All the regional convention, including Lisbon, but also Tokyo Convention, Buenos Aires, Addis Abeba, and recently the Arab region. So I think it's very important to highlight that the international normative instruments are really valorizing and recognizing the importance of supporting refugees in their quest for recognition. But as I think you mentioned earlier, there is a gap between the intentions, the philosophical, the policy, and the implementation, the practice, and how we can reach out to people. So I think there are three aspects that seems to me important in our discussion today. And thanks, Simone, for referring and making the presentation. The first of all is obviously how we offer and how technology, and particularly AI, can help accompany the refugees and displaced person in this path of sharing their experience and knowledge and skills that they have acquired elsewhere and making it accessible eventually from one language to another, from narrative or document or other tools to something that is accessible, and make that accessible also for credential evaluators or for guidance or accompanying persons. So I think it's very important to consider that learning pathway and that pathway of recognition. Second is, what are the tools that can help us achieve that? Tools that can translate languages immediately, tools that can capture different data sources, tools that can in a way present these data in a much more accessible manner, but tools that can help assess as well those skills and knowledge that are shared by the person. But eventually, I think what you are mentioning, the other aspect is looking at impact, and impact in terms of learning pathway, meaning how this can offer and what AI can do to offer the persons the learning opportunities that he or she can get, or employment opportunity or participation in societies in the host communities where they are. So I think generative AI can help in connecting the dots, in connecting data sources, in connecting these opportunities. Maybe the last point in this first intervention is to say that as you were discussing earlier with Melanie and other colleagues, obviously we are in a very fragmented landscape where we have many initiatives, we have many tools, we have many resources, and that's good. I mean, because we have a goodwill, we have a lot of commitment, but that makes life very difficult in terms of how we reach scale, how we synergize. And I think having a community of practice that can share those approaches, that can build together maybe some common principles, convergence or at least interoperability of tools, and in a way having that clearinghouse place where we can share those tools and work as a community of practice, that's something that I think we are missing. And again, the GDN is the place where we can all come together and where we can create and we can engage in these community of practices and dialogue and peer learning, as was mentioned earlier. Over to you, Simone.
Thank you, Baran. Thank you very much. So when we started to think more deeply about this concept of REGEN, there were really two elements that we were bringing forward. One was a community of practice, as Baran highlighted. And this was supposed to be, and still might be, a gathering of minds that would do research, from landscape analysis and what tools are available to just more hardcore academic research on this topic, that would inform the second pillar, which was an AI tool, loosely based on those 5 key components. Now, it was clear that this conversation needed to be had in different places that would have to be in sync. And so the tool incarnated itself, or a way of building this tool was offered by an opportunity that the Experience You project brought about. So you might have heard about Experience You this morning in the workshop, and even earlier today a little bit. But the T3 Innovation Network, together with a design lab, have been running this great project for a couple of years. And so in phase 2 of Experience You, we took this idea and created a use case for migrants or refugees to pilot it. And this is where Colin, who has been running the Experience You project, came in the picture, and Chris later on as providing a user base on which to test some of those assumptions and ideas. Colin, do you want to tell us a bit more about Experience You?
Sure. Thank you for creating the conversation. I'm thinking back to a year ago where I was just like Borean, a big face on the screen, because there was some unrest and some dangerous situations for people traveling. And I think that's a really interesting context to enter into this conversation, because that's the population that we're talking about are folks that have difficulty bringing their experience with them when they cross borders or they cross jurisdictions in the migrant community and refugee community. So Experience You is a project that was brought to Education Design Lab through the T3 Innovation Network and the U.S. Chamber Foundation. That's narrowly focused on generating LERs from past experience and skills so that individuals can bring them forward with them in a digital format. And so Education Design Lab is a US-based nonprofit that focuses on the intersection of building the future of learning and work. And so that means we get to work on really complex challenges that help to support what we would call new majority learners in very specific contexts. And so a lot of what the lab does is builds micro-pathways, micro-learning pathways with community colleges and other education providers to help individuals earn the skills that they need to go be successful in a very specific industry or role. And those micro-pathways also allow for the stacking of credentials and the stacking of skills in a way that allow them to work, make some money, continue learning, potentially make more money, move up in their profession, and continue to navigate their career. And so the Experience You project was a really great project that allows us to create a community of practice around organizations that wanted to demonstrate a proof of concept, which was AI and other emerging technologies can really help to create LERs at scale for individuals that already have work experience, that already have learned skills and acquired skills along the way. So that was phase 1 of that work, which happened over basically over the course of 2023. We had about a dozen project teams working together to really demonstrate that we have the technology, we have the tools, we have the interoperable standards to make this work. So let's do it. And phase 2 is really focusing on scale. And one of the great parts of phase 2 was that it opened up an international partnership and opportunity for project teams and firms outside of the United States to really focus on the populations that they're working with. And that's where migrants and Chris entered into the conversation, is that we really see specific use cases and specific contexts where using AI and other tools to help kind of harvest the skills through, whether it's through an AI chat conversation or uploading documents of evidence of earning and achievement or certifications at a specific country or a specific context, can then be mapped and this is where AI really demonstrated a really powerful application, is that mapping skills that have been acquired in one context, maybe in one language, to the skills that exist in another framework, in another context, in another language, that's where something like AI can become really powerful in the development of some of small language models that are really custom and fine-tuned to specific audiences with specific data that's informing and building that tool. Really creates dynamic opportunities where they didn't exist previously. And so Experience U has been a really fantastic opportunity to convene thinkers and leaders who are working with focused populations to solve those problems so that individuals will have digital credentials inside a wallet that they can take with them to really unlock opportunity. Now, I think Simone talked about some of the principles and projects and practices that are really meant to impact people, and that is a great sort of through line, I think, for what the Experience U project has done. And I think Chris is going to talk a little more about what the Migrants platform has been doing over the last couple of years, and how creating visibility to skills that refugees have can enable opportunity for where they are currently and a destination that they might want to move.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. So before handing it over to Chris, I wanted to recognize Chris for really having been one of the first individuals that allowed me to think in a different way about this issue. That reframing, thinking about recognition of refugees in a much more open way, was when I met Chris, which was more than 5 years ago, as he was getting started on his own journey, which he'll tell you more about. But that thought of recognizing people or migrants for their traumatic mobility experience emerged there in a conversation with him. And so since then, I've become an advisor of migrants. I've just connected through the lives of this particular segment of the population in a different way. And so I was incredibly excited by the opportunity that Experience U made available to try some of these new ideas out in a sandbox environment, but with a user base that is significant. You know, Chris will tell you more about this, but some of the projects that we know of that have more institutional labeling or value or gravitas have really had very, very low impact. I'm sorry to say, but that's a reality. We want to do some reality checks here. And whilst I feel that there are other grassroots, more bottom-up experiences that have really had, much more of an impact, but we don't really talk about. So I'm very excited that Chris was able to be here with us and finally engage with GDN. And I'd like for him to introduce himself. And Chris, tell us your story a little bit. You migrants, and how you connected with REGEN, and maybe the proof of concept that you're working on in Experience U.
Yeah, thank you, Simone. Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me, and sorry for the virtual participation. Well, my name is Chris Richmond-Zee. I was born in Ivory Coast, but I had the privilege to be adopted and to grow up between Switzerland and United States. I graduated in international rights and diplomacy, and in 2010, I joined a small private agency of the European Commission called Frontex. And basically, my job was the monitoring of all the factors that could lead to the potential movement of individuals towards the external borders of the EU. And I've been doing this job from 2010 to 2015, so inside what we call the Arab Spring. And I really had the chance to be in the right place and in the right position to understand the struggle of the European Commission in general and the member states in managing migration flows. And I also understood that the missing point of the puzzle was data related to the background and the aspirations of every single migrant, asylum seeker, and refugee already in Europe. So in 2015, I decided to resign from the agency. And after having a couple entrepreneurial experiences in 2017, I decided to incorporate a for-profit organization called Migrants, thanks to the support of 3 business angels. And basically, the mission of Migrants is to generate more economic and social value for both parties, asylum seekers, migrants, and refugees. one side, and on the other side, host communities. Every single person, every single migrant has a background, and every single migrant, asylum seeker, and refugee has a professional aspiration. So we started by building a micro-learning digital platform to map their background and also to upskill and reskill their background based on the national labor market shortage. And we did that through more than 10,000 model quizzes in microlearning. And then we evolved into what we call adaptive microlearning, where every single person can personalize their training program based on their background or their aspiration. And through the quizzes, they can really validate their hard skills, soft skills, digital skills, and language skills to understand not just their potential, but also their areas of strength, weaknesses, and where they can really improve. We use data generated through the platform to share some information with third parties, in this case, small, medium enterprises and corporates. And in 2021, we built a second platform called PickMe. And PickMe is basically a data visualization platform where every single corporate can interrogate the database of migrants and extract the short list of all the profiles to compare the data and the skill sets to understand who is the most suitable profile to fulfill their shortage. PickMe is a subscription platform, so companies pay to get access to the database. And through PickMe, today we place on average more than 90 persons every single month. The goal this year is to place at least 5,500 people, and next year the desire is to place at least 3,000 people. In the meantime, we also understood that the journey of our beneficiaries doesn't end with the placement, but they have other challenges that they need to overcome. And one of them is what we call the access to credit. So we decided to pilot another solution that is called CashMe. And CashMe started with a learn-to-earn model, giving the chance to our beneficiaries to earn some money based on the quality of their training program. And today, CashMe is evolving into a learn-to-borrow model. All our beneficiaries, when they reach some specific benchmark, they can ask to receive a personal loan, and the loan is given from a third party, in this case, a formal and financial institution, and we track their ability to repay the loans with interest within specific deadlines. So 7 years later, we have more than 800,000 active beneficiaries on migrants in 4 different continents. 35% of them are in Italy. With PickMe, we have more than 200 corporates using the platform, and we place on average more than 90 persons every single month. And with CashMe, last year, we gave away more than 95,000 euros to more than 350 beneficiaries. And the goal with the learn-to-borrow model is to give away at least 500,000 euros in loans starting from next year.
Thank you, Chris. I think it is impressive. Yeah. If you compare it to the numbers of other initiatives that have higher visibility. Chris, I want to stay with you for a bit and ask you if you can take us through what has been your journey with Experience You or in testing out this REGEN concept. What are you working on?
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious that if you don't have any AI component in your solution today, you are, outside the game. But we thought about how we can leverage these new technologies to generate more economic and social value for our beneficiaries and host communities. We decided to use AI on migrants, so for our beneficiaries, especially because we had many challenges in continues to, progressing with the content, with the assessment and so far. One of the main challenges that we had is the internal process to identify the skill set for every single role, identify the most relevant content to create the assessment and the training program, build the training content and the assessment, and also to translate everything in different languages. And the other problem that we had was to align the skill set with a formal framework. So first of all, we decided to leverage the power of the ESCO framework and the ESCO taxonomy. The beauty behind the ESCO framework is the fact that we have all the roles already mapped and all the skill set assigned to every single role. So through the AI tool, basically we use the API from the ESCO framework. We generate the assessment for every single role that the company are asking to us. And in few seconds, we are able to deliver and to provide to our beneficiaries the most relevant assessment to identify their hard skills, soft skills, digital skills, and language skills requested for every single role. So we validate the background, we validate the skill set acquired through the generative assessment, but it's also true that by doing so, we are able to align the skill set that that are emerging from the assessment with a formal framework. And this is useful for what we call a relocation program, or giving the chance to our beneficiaries to relocate in other places, in other countries. And we continue to generate the impact because we are able to, faster the pathways to the most relevant roles and job opportunities available based on the skill set. So if our trainees are equipped with the skill set requested by one or many roles, they are redirected directly to that specific job opportunity. But if they are not eligible, we can suggest them different pathways or different job opportunities that are aligned with their background or the skill set they have in that specific moment. So we are trying to leverage not just the AI, but also a formal framework to build more structure and also to be more, let's say, formal, and give the chance to our beneficiaries to get access to the most relevant job opportunities in the fastest way as possible.
Thank you, Chris. That's awesome. Good luck with that, and hopefully we'll see some additional results and we can share them with you. All right, I want to go back to Colin. And Colin, in phase one, there had been some initial use cases that really targeted underserved populations that provided, to some extent, an attempt to hit one of those 5 components. If migrants in its pilot really tested validation, alignment, and impact, I think at least one of the projects in phase 1 of Experience 2 tried to look at the first phase, the discovery piece, when you try to understand the skills that a user might have through a conversation. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so last year at GDN, we talked a little bit about a project that was focused on second chance individuals, incarcerated individuals inside American prisons, and some of the challenges that are connected to the release and re-entry into the workforce, and how difficult that is to have a big gap in experience. But for many individuals inside of systems, prison systems, they're acquiring skills, they're doing jobs, they're working inside of those facilities. And one of the projects built a tool to help translate the experience inside of those facilities into skilled credentials that would allow them to, upon their release, access those digital credentials and then go into the workforce with some representation of the skills that they had acquired. And that kind of context and that opportunity to take what was a custom AI chat agent, essentially, that would have a conversation with an individual and then map that to some skills that, like Chris mentioned in their example, those skills can be connected to and mapped to frameworks that are understandable by potential employers and can show that they have some competency in an area that is a job role that they want to be hired for. And that's really, I think the context of some of these projects really helps to set the stage for how complicated these problems are. But then by using common data structures and data formats and common language, you can help to translate some of those opportunities into different contexts and help understand how skills map from one framework to another, and really creating interoperability is possible by using common data standards that are open and available and well established. And I think that's a part of the Experience U project that was very clearly demonstrated, is that these standards do create a really powerful mapping opportunity, and the technologies do exist. It's the people and the systems that are actually really more problematic, because it is a reframing of how you're thinking about individuals and their achievements, but also how you're representing those and mapping those to opportunities. It doesn't always have to be degrees and certifications. Many individuals, the resume is a great example. That is a self-assertion. That is something that's created by an individual to say, I can do these things. What these credentials are able to do is offer a package that shows these skills have actually been validated in a specific context by a system, whether that's an assessment or a person or somebody who was there. And by sharing the credential into a new environment, there's a layer of verification that goes with that, so that when somebody views that credential or ingests it into their system to try to understand what's inside of it, that information has been verified. And so that allows for a really powerful passing of trust and an opportunity to say, this is a new way of imagining skills and imagining data that really unlocks potential and opportunity for all types of folks. But that was one example of a project. And in phase 2, it's really scaling some of these solutions and the proof of concept to start impacting people in larger numbers. And like Chris mentioned, the goals that they've set for their project with My Grants and Pick Me and Cash Me, that suite of solutions really has the potential to impact larger numbers when people accept and start to trust these digital packages.
Thank you, Colin. So if we map that to the 5 components, I think what I'm picking up is discovery, and then in the work bay, in the incarcerated use case, you also have recognition, because you'll be issuing learning and employment records. Great. All right. Boran, UNESCO has been the lighthouse of recognition, and you've heard some of these experiences, and so this technological evolution needs to happen under your watch. How are you feeling when you hear about these initiatives? What is some guidance that you can provide, and maybe give us like a path forward? All that in 90 seconds.
We'll do. I have 3 ideas that I would like to share. Thank you, Simone. I think, 3 ideas and takeaways that we can take forward. First of all, our discussion shows really the need for this community of practice, because we have practices and we have different initiatives that are really very rich, very inspiring, and what Colin and Chris have shared is really very important, but that calls for this community of practice to share. The second is that obviously we have tools that have been developed, and things are moving fast. I think what we discussed with Simone back a few months ago regarding a tool, I think we, to use the term that Colin just used, we need this suite of tools and see how these different tools can speak to each other. This interoperability seems to me a very important aspect, and work that we can do together, see how we create this ecosystem of different tools that can serve the refugees and displaced persons. And the third point, we have more than 117 million forcibly displaced persons. So, and you are right, Simone, when you say the formal initiatives. If I take the European qualification passport, it reached more than 1,000 person. UNESCO qualification passport is dozens of people. So we need to reach a scale. But obviously, it's about the legitimacy, it's about the reliability, it's about the value of these, I would say, passport or tools or resources that are put at disposal. But I think that calls a bit for this collaboration, maybe between different initiatives, and each initiative can bring this value addition. And UNESCO, as you said, is really driving this agenda around recognition of displaced persons, refugees, migrants, and other people who leave their homeland or homes and move elsewhere. And we know that this will only increase with the climate refugees and other refugees that unfortunately are taking place. So how we can combine, I would say, these different initiatives and leverage the assets of each of them. And again, AI can help us connect the dot, and I think this is the work that we need to take forward. And UNESCO, together with all colleagues in the room, and with you, Simone, and with the GDN team, we are very keen to continue this path of collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Warren. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Chris. I just want to close with a quick call to action. So this theme, refugees and AI, is the pet use case, right? Everyone is flocking to solving the migrants issue with technology. It's a form of digital colonization. So if I were to tell you like what you can do in this space, the best advice that I could give you is don't think about technology, do your community service, follow a refugee or a migrant in local community, understand what they really live through in the ordinary lives, what their basic needs are, and then how we might help them with this additional technology layer. But you'll get way more insights in just using your time for community service for these people. And that is the best thing I think you could do today and that I invite you to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And a wonderful call to action also from Brahim, building a network of networks. Well, that's a true GDN ambassador right there. We have a break now. There's some coffee, tea, drinks, and some snacks out there. Just want to say that also you will see it when you leave this room, that there's a huge screen out there that showcases these presentations at the same time. So you have multiple options. You can sit there, there's tables, so you can move back and forth if you want, although not too much during a session, because that might be a bit unruly. After, we have an afternoon tea break until 3 p.m. And then we'll start again with a plenary session about connecting the dots, creating connected services for end users from our colleagues from Norway. So thank you very much and see you in 30 minutes.